Well, hi everybody again, and welcome to Coffee with Craig. Today, I'm looking up because I thought I left the lights on. Today, I'm going to be talking all about the migrant crisis in particular, but we'll also be taking all your questions. Now, if you're here for the first time, I'm Craig Hamilton Parker. I'm a psychic medium, and I give my insights into current affairs and what's happening, make my predictions, and question some of the spiritual dilemmas that some of these issues that we see in the world present us with. So we're going to talk about all that. We're going live today, so I've gone kind of randomly live today. So welcome those who managed to catch me, and we'll be talking all about the problems that are happening presently here in the UK with a bill going through House of Parliament to stop the boats, as it were. And also we'll talk about some of the stuff that's going on in America and through Europe. And I'll take lots of other questions as the program progresses. So we'll move into all sorts of areas later on. But the initial theme that we're going to be talking about today is the migrant crisis. So welcome to Coffee with Craig. Well, here we are again with another show. So I'm going to share my thoughts with you, first of all, about some of the issues that are happening and what I feel is going to happen, particularly the current news that's happening in the UK here, where basically what's happening, for those of you joining from America, is they're trying to stop the boats coming across the channel. People are dying on those boats. People already today, including young children, have died again trying to cross the perilous uh, waters that lie between Britain and France. And this area is absolutely full of shipping. It's quite reasonably rough at the moment, but sometimes it can get perilously rough. And the boats that they're putting people in, as you've probably seen on the news, sink very easily, are overloaded, and is being run as a massive criminal organization that's behind it. Same thing's happening with people being brought in through the Mediterranean into Italy, across from Turkey before we were getting it. We got Europe is being flooded with people. Those people get into Europe. If they get chucked out of a country there, the first thing they want to do is obviously find another place of sanctuary. So they then head off to Britain. And we have a major crisis here, as do many other countries in Europe. So this is becoming one of the major worries of our time. It was something that was predicted actually by Nostradamus. I won't go into the details on that one yet, but I might make an interesting separate show. But he talks often about the flood of people into Europe and the overwhelming of Europe, particularly by Islam, not necessarily by war, but by the sheer numbers. So we have our Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, who's not particularly liked by most people. He's very low in the polls at the moment on all sides. And here in the UK, we've got a election coming up probably this year. It has to be this year because they're running out of time. So the government at the moment, which is what we call the Tory government here in the UK, is trying to push through legislation, which they're pretty much through with now, push it through the House of Lords, which is like trying to put it through the houses in the House of Representatives and so forth, and in the Senate in America. So we have these sort of barriers to stop this legislation going through. Just like what happened with Brexit, everything's been going absolutely crazy with all the lawyers on earth making a fortune out of this. But the Rwanda policy is basically what's happening with that is we're saying, in order to stop the boats, when people come over here, we're going to fly them over to Rwanda and resettle them there. And this is so far cost estimates that vary, but the costs they reckon is something like 160 million pounds has already been spent, and not a single person has been flown over to Rwanda. So already the policy's failed. But the question is now, will this work? Will the people coming over illegally on the boats be flown off to Rwanda to discourage people from coming to the UK? And I predict that this whole policy is going to continue to fail. Rwanda policy will fail. And the reason it will fail are many, but also my feelings are that I see it not acting as a deterrent, and I'm seeing it also not saving the Conservative stroke Tory party from a disastrous electoral result. Because this is politics behind it again. Why suddenly does it become so hugely important as we approach an election? Because from Rishi Sunak's point of view, I was pronounced his name slightly wrong, sorry, but from his point of view, it's his last ditch to get voters on his side. Because do the population of Britain generally want this policy to succeed? Well, basically, it's in everybody's interest, whether it be people who have settled here, because having illegal immigration constantly in the news is not allowing people that have legitimately settled in Britain to be able to sort of feel comfortable, because people begin to feel negative towards everybody settled in Britain. I mean, it's inevitable, it becomes an us and them situation when you see it happening on the news. Similarly, the people who have the indigenous people of Britain, they too feel their nose put out, because so many people pouring into the country, particularly pouring in illegally, is a problem for our country. We can't get a dentist, can't get a national health dentist, you can't get housing. All the young people in a crisis state, because there's no availability of housing, because so many people have been housed from overseas, there's nothing left. Even the hotels, which most people can't afford to use, are being packed full of people coming from abroad. So we have a major crisis in housing, in health, in every way, and they pour into the country. Nobody's got any medical insurance. Like if we go to abroad, we go on holiday or on vacation, we have to have medical insurance of some sort in case we get ill, but people just pour in and throw themselves upon the system. So the idea is, right, okay, we're going to send them back. We're going to send them back in aeroplanes. If we can't do it we can't do it with normal planes, we're going to send them, commercial planes. We're going to send them back with the RAF. We'll perhaps even use the Prime Minister's plane. Somehow or other, by hook or by crook, they're going to be sent back. But I don't see this working, sadly. I think we do need a deterrent, because illegal immigration is good for nobody. People are dying in the Channel. Illegal immigration is not good for the country. It's not good for anybody in Britain, wherever you come from, whatever your heritage here. It's a bad mark for everybody. And yet we are put in a spiritual crisis with this, because obviously these people coming from overseas are desperate. Many of them are economic migrants. We got people now coming all the way from as far as field as I think it's from Vietnam and Thailand and places, and coming into the country seeking, hardly being refugees, they're seeking to benefit from the European prosperity. But the problem is, so many people are descending. Is immigration, and I'd like your thoughts on this in the comments, is immigration such a wrong thing? Is it wrong to talk about it? Because if we talk about immigration, we get called a bigot, or we get called racist. But it's not about racism, is it? It's about culture in many respects. And so I can't see it working, but I think there's going to be some changes that will make things work later on. But at the moment, this policy is going to completely fail. My thoughts are that what's going to happen is that I can't, and I've said this before, but I predict that Rishi Sunak will be gone by autumn. He's not going to make it. This policy is going to fail so miserably that it's his last ditch to try to gain popularity with the popular vote, as it were. It's all about politics. It's not really about the votes. And he will, I feel him going by autumn. This will, I feel, give a new life to the Conservative Party, because it will give an opportunity for the, what they call the right of the party, but many people would perhaps call the centre of the party. It would give people like Boris Johnson, Liz Truss, Suella Braverman, and all the other rights of the party. It would give them a new lease of life and a possibility of being able to steer the party back towards the Conservatives' more traditional values, as it were, and may help to stem the threat that's coming to the party from the rise of reform. Now, I don't see reform movement getting lots of votes. I predict that in the coming election, reform will get votes, but it won't get seats. And this will be a problem, because it will mean people are voting for the worst of two evils. In fact, I see happening in the British election, in particular, the main problem is going to be an extremely low turnout. There will be an extremely low turnout in the British election. And the problems will be that voters are not voting because they can't vote for either side. And it will ultimately mean, and it will mean a neck and neck. And I see the Labour government coming in particularly through Scotland, but it will be so neck and neck that we may have some form of hung parliament, I feel. At the moment, people are saying, oh, it's all going to be a major swing to Labour. They're going to sweep the board. But I don't think it's going to be quite as easy as that, because if Sunak goes as I predict, there's going to be it's going to become neck and neck. So those are my thoughts on the political side of this and what's happening with it. But the problem, what we have with this, is also another spiritual crisis to this, really, isn't it? Because they're saying that the boats, the people will be flown to Rwanda and will stop the boats within 10 to 12 weeks. Well, that's hitting us right at the time when the biggest flood of immigrants usually comes across the channel, because that's when the waters are still enough to take these dodgy boats, which they won't even give them to Ukraine. They're so fallen to bits. But it'll give a chance for the numbers that'll be the time when the numbers are going up. Rishi Sunak has not mentioned also in his speeches and things that the numbers have gone up by 25% recently. So the public are fed up with this. I feel Britain is being broken, people feel. And why do they feel that? And is it right to feel that? Is it right to think, well, these poor people coming into the country, surely we should help them? But like I say, what's happening is a cultural crisis rather than a racial crisis. You imagine. So I love India, don't I? I go to India and I love India, and I worshipped in the temples. I've climbed the holy mountains of Arunachala. I've been to all the places, and I've looked at the country and thought, what a wonderful culture this is. This is something that's so unique, so marvelous in its spiritual side, right? So it's a pilgrimage. But supposing, we filled India with millions and millions of Americans and millions of Chinese and millions of Europeans, and they all settled there, and suddenly it was swamped. I'd see Arunachala, for example, with perhaps a burger bar halfway up and maybe a McDonald's at the bottom where you can get something to eat, or coffee bars outside the temples and so forth. And we start to westernize it and turn it into our own culture. And in no time at all, the very spirit of the place would be completely destroyed. So that's an extreme idea, but this is what's happening. It certainly happened in Tibet, for example. One of the complaints of the Dalai Lama was that so many Chinese were forced into to resettle in Tibet that the Tibetans became a minority in their own country. And the danger is people are feeling this now because in parts of London, in many parts of London, and in many other large cities such as Bradford, Leeds, Birmingham, and so forth, people feel that they've become a minority in their own country. Now, that's not a good thing, because what's happening is when you get this huge influx of people from other cultures, what happens is those cultures don't integrate. They form their own societies quite naturally. If you've got millions of British people together living in another country, as we did with when Britain had its empires, as it were, you form your own little enclaves. And the problem is we've got multiple cultures within one society, and this creates division. And this, I don't think, can ever work. It's when we have respect for another country and we integrate with it that we become a good citizen of that country. Hopefully, what I are trying to do, because Jane and myself have a place in Italy. When we go there, we're trying to learn Italian. We're trying to live the Italian way. When you're there, you're trying to leave a small footprint. You're trying to add something to what's around you and not impose your ideas on and that's the same way it should be when anybody joins another country. You connect with it. Am I wrong with that? People would say, oh, that's one big racist thing to say, that sort of thing, or that's bigoted. But is it really? Aren't the values of each culture of the world and each nation of the world of value to us somehow? Aren't they valuable things to have? Isn't it good to have these things? So I'm seeing that this, in the way forward with the future, I predict that this separation of cultures is going to create major conflicts in the years ahead. In particular, I see France, Germany, who have been flooded with immigrants, becoming real tinderpots of discontent, real on the streets warfare in France and Germany in particular, and even Sweden. These problems we have been brewing in the background for too long, and everybody swept it under the carpet because, just like I've described with the British politics, it's politically too difficult to handle. And similarly, in America, we have exactly the same thing. We have a broken border where people are swarming in, not just from Mexico and South America and so far, all the poor people in these countries moving forward to try to find a new life, but they're even getting people swarming in from places like China and the Far East, all pouring through these borders. People naturally are trying to seek a better life. And the problem is, as the world's problems continue, the whole thing starts to collapse. Imagine if it was your home. If your home, you invited somebody. Well, like, for example, I remember when we had one Christmas, we invited somebody that was homeless to have a meal with the family at Christmas, and that was a lovely thing to do, and it all worked out fine, and it was it all worked lovely. But imagine if you did that and you decided to open your home to anybody that wanted to come into it, and thousands of people came into it. It's like a party was gate crashed. I remember when I was a kid at home, right? And everything was wrecked. But the problem is, it's a bit like that. It starts to gate crash. Even with the best of people, the whole thing would fall into disarray. And this is the problem we have. It's the scale of it that is creating the problem. And I don't see sending a few hundred people to Rwanda is going to put anybody off, because these people are desperate. They've traveled all up through Africa, all across from Afghanistan, all across all the different countries of the world, then across Europe. They fought their way into Europe, and now they get to the last place they think they can find sanctuary, which is Britain, which has always been good to people. But they're not going to stop. So another thing I see what's going to happen, I feel, and this would be very divisive for the Tory party, but I see in the Tory manifesto, there's going to be an announcement that they're going to leave the European Commission for Human Rights, the ECHR. They're going to leave the Human Commission for Human Rights. I also predict that the Tories are going to repeal the Human Rights Act, British Human Rights Act. And that's going to be a major policy. And that policy will be divisive within the Tory party. It will also draw lines between what Labour has to offer and the Tories. So that's something politically I'm seeing happening, the repeal of the Human Rights Act as a proposal. And this will be very contentious. It will be massively divisive in many ways, but in some ways one of the last ditch attempts to try to find some policy from a failing party. So I also have to think about this in terms, okay, this is a deterrent. I don't think it's going to work process. I think the whole thing's going to blow up, really. And even though we might see people being forced across to Rwanda using the Air Force, and the arguments put forward about criminals and things, what about the issues of it? And is there anything we can do with it long term? It's the same problems appearing in America, exactly the same problems we got here in Europe and as well. You have so many people flooding illegally, as well as too many migrants generally, is creating divisions culturally, which is creating clashes, which is creating division. And simultaneously, we have also what I would call a disease happening, which is a psychological disease, which I consider as woke as being a psychological disease, where people's basic values are undermined, basic human common sense is overturned in favor of strange ideas. And I see it as kind of like a psychological illness that is gradually started and been propagated, deliberately stirred up to kind of weaken everything that the West, everything that democracy holds dear. I think there's been political persuasions behind this. Now, one last thing, I also, because I'm going to take your questions in a moment, and I'll see if I can pick up on any topics you want to ask me. I also asked the Ching about this migrant crisis. What should I say about this? What can you advise? It gave me, for those that are interested in the I Ching. The I Ching's the old Chinese oracle. I use it a lot in my readings, actually, and I find it really helpful to give instruction to people. But I cast the I Ching, and it gave us the hexagram that Wilhelm calls work upon what is spoiled. Sometimes it can also be removing corruption, can be another explanation for. And this talks about not so much it talks about the work we have to do, the work we have to do to improve and correct our society in this case. And the Ching gave me a moving line, which it gave me 6th and the 4th place, if anybody wants to look it up, which basically tells us tolerating decay leads to humiliation. That's the simplest way of describing it. Tolerating decay leads to humiliation. Or another way of describing it, tolerating what has been spoiled by the father and continuing one sees humiliation. And the whole concept of this says that we haven't taken measures. This is something that the Ching seems to suggest to me. It's been kicked under the carpet so much, the issue's been swept away so much that it's growing into such an extent that it leads to a dangerous and bad situation. And basically, none of the governments of the world are addressing what I think most of the population of the world, or the indigenous peoples of the countries, feel is that the undermining of their culture. And the augury of the Ching is that this is really bad. The augury of the Ching is with the 4th place says in one interpretation. The 4th is blah blah blah. To deal with what is happening to its predecessors, the character might procrastinate. It is too general. It's too generous. If continued in this way, it will not succeed and will bring regret in the end. The message of this line is that in applying a remedy, one should cure the cause instead of dealing with the symptom. And applied to the Rwanda concept, we're covering up. It's a plaster on a gaping wound, isn't it? We got to get to the cause of the issue, and that is cultural integration. That is to get rid of this multicultural idea and say each culture is valuable, and it's for the people that come into the culture to conform to the standards of the culture they come to, rather than say we've got to stand separate with a separate culture. That's the only way we're going to deal with it. The only way we're going to deal with the flood of immigrants coming into the country, or illegal immigrants, but I emphasize, the only way we're going to is do like the Australians did, and that is to send people back. And the only way people can be sent back to the country of origin that they came from is by getting out of the European Commission for Human Rights. So I predict that's going to become a major issue over the coming months. You watch it, it'll all be in the news, and there'll be thoughts about that. There's no news about it at the moment, you'll note, but this is what I feel is going to happen in the coming months. This is going to become one of the major issues. So I'm going to take your questions in a moment, guys. I've gone on perhaps a bit too long here, but I'm seeding ideas. And what do you think? What can you do about, what can be done about America? What can be done about the scale of this? What should be done? What's the human way of doing? What's the humanitarian way of doing these things? Please put your comments in the description below and give me your thoughts. I read them, every single one of them, and it's great that you all interact. And before we go on to the questions, I don't have any sort of I've had a lot of companies coming to me saying, can you put our product on and do an advert for our product and things? Well, I don't do that. But I do ask people if you can support the channel in many ways as well. So you can become a patron. That would be fantastic. That helps us with the studio to keep the Craig and Jane show going. You can book something here like a reading, or you can buy a NAADI reading if you like, because I get a small commission from those. Or, wonderful, if you bought one of my books. So I'm just going to plug one of my books before we go on to the questions. Haha, you can't get away from it. But my book, Dream Meanings, this is one of my favorites, which I don't talk about much. And I was thinking to myself, why don't I tell people about this book? Because it's a real major book of mine. It's actually a compendium of, I think it was 5 books of mine that I brought together as one. And the camera goes off and blips. The camera don't like it. But great book, available on Amazon. It's in the description below. It tells you all about how to interpret your dreams, but also from a psychic viewpoint. So I'm covering things like reincarnation in there and remembering past lives. I'm talking about in depth about how to interpret dreams. I'm very influenced by Carl Jung, so there's a lot of Jungian type of psychology in there. I also very influenced by modern psychology in it, about fantasies and things like that, and how we fall into illusions, and also the more wacky stuff, I suppose you could call it, like out of body travel, sharing dreams, mutual dreams, and dreams of the future, of course, and how to predict the future. So it's all in my book, Your Secret Dream Meanings, okay, on Amazon and on the link below. So that's the ad. I'm done. Sorry. We all got to make a living. Right, guys, let's have a look at some of your questions. Now, do please add them as questions if you can, because it can get a bit out of control. This, so you've had a question. You can always put another question in if you like now, because I won't see your ones at the top. Okay, Australian ones. I often get missed, the Australians, as do South Africans and Canadians. So I'll try to look for some of your comments. Will Australia face an economic crisis and then an outflow of the new migrants? Now, you bear with me, because I've got to I'm tuning in this to see what I can get guides. So just going to slow the pace a little bit now. Okay, so as we get as I sort of tune into these things. I feel Australia is on the edge of a sort of an economic crisis, because it's excuse me. I feel that Australia is on the edge of an economic crisis because of its relationship, particularly with China. And in the coming years, in the coming months even, we're going to see a growing crisis with Taiwan, as I've spoken about before. And difficulties economically and a compromise for Australians. And I'm feeling this will be the main economic crisis that is going to hit the country in probably 2025 as well. And I don't see necessarily a big outflow of migrants, but with the coming unemployment that comes with it, we may see again a few problems and difficulties with the integration of the people that have already got there. So I don't see the same crisis levels that is happening in Europe for Australia. Okay, I'll just see what I pick up. Children are going missing through this mass migration. Is this something happening on a large scale? Well, I do. This is something that I did feel, actually, because a lot of people have a lot of fears about many of the sort of abuse of children that goes on in all countries, including the developed countries. And so often this is hidden privately. People don't like to talk about it. But also, I feel there's a big thing in the background somewhere with the slavery of young children. I know there's a lot of crazy conspiracy theories about children's blood to keep people young and things like that. But I feel that there's one of the major problems with this crisis is children can so easily get separated from their parents. And I feel that in time to come, we will see more news stories and revelations about children who have been deliberately separated from their parents, told they've gone missing, and then turned up in some ghastly uh, situation. Right. So yes, children do go missing through mass migration, and it's one of the other hidden horrors of this whole thing that really does have to be stopped. Yeah, of course, I forget that Ireland's been getting similar problems, and those of you joining will know that in your local news, in all the countries of Europe, we've got the similar sort of reaction to this. And the problem is everybody's mainly heading for the places where it's easier to get asylum. Germany, France have been, but they're beginning to turn. And Ireland, I know from friends in Ireland that culturally, a lot of the traditional Irish ways are kind of being disrupted because they feel that, again, you've been swamped. The problem is it's the scale of it. And this is why we do really need to change this Human Rights Act. And I think I have said that eventually, I know Ireland's really embedded into the idea of Europe at the moment because it's always been supported very much by European money. But I feel eventually Ireland will leave the European Union. And I see you've got a few comments, people saying there too as well about that. So yeah, there's so much going on, and this doesn't make the UK news really, but from being there how difficult it can be. Okay, I always like I see Jason there. You always give some interesting. I recognize your green face, Jason. Yeah, okay, you always give some interesting. I haven't read it yet, but let's see. Hello, Craig. Will the two woke major parties in the UK both do poorly at the next general election, and will the Reform Party be able to make major inroads and form a government? Well, they both, but that is the problem. We have that woke illness, or really the fear of even doing anything, the fear of sticking your neck over the parapets, both with the Labour government and the weak sort of version we have of the Tory government. Both aren't addressing the very issues that people are most concerned about, which is partly migration. It is partly housing. It is partly the collapse of the NHS, but it's also very much about the mindset of wokeness, which is it embedded itself into the BBC and the rest of it. And I think what's going to happen is people aren't going to vote. This is what I said. People are not going to. There's going to be one of the lowest. Here we are. Prediction for you. A prediction I make is that for the general election, it's going to be one of the lowest turnouts of all time at the polls. And my feeling is that this will give Reform an opportunity, and I think Reform will get some seats. But the problem is, it's really what Reform is part of is a disenchanted Tory vote and also some disenchanted Labour votes. I think Reform will make inroads, but I can't see them having enough influence to be able to form either a coalition government or a strong alternative. The power of Reform will be that it will force the Tories to rethink their policies. So we'll see a stronger opposition, as it were, but I can't see them breaking through. But that's sad because the way our political system in the UK works. That's an interesting one, but I don't know about that actually because I've not seen that. But I feel there's going to be a sort of a turn against wearing traditional dress, particularly in education. You see, woke has taken over, and everybody's scared to talk about anything, and everybody's scared to say, well, is it kind of good that everybody starts wearing religious clothing to schools? In particular. So I feel there will be something in schools where they'll start to say, no, everybody's got to be the same in the school. Everybody, like we used to have, we all actually wear school uniform and all hated it. That would be in some, and I was one of the ones that fought most against it. I remember cutting the tie in half and getting told off by my mum. I will not conform, but you were forced to. But in many respects, we need something more like that. We need to make it more even. Why should people um what they're like as kids, particularly, make a lot of fuss about who I am, my pronouns, it's an attention thing, isn't it? And even the teachers that sort of say about my pronouns and all this, these pronoun enthusiasts, are dodgy people. So we need to sort of take out all these things that divide us, whether it be sexual sort of who I am sort of things or religious things. Let's all just be the same. Let's all wear nice white shirts and orange scarves and all look the same. I mean, I think that's what you need. And you need that in school. You need that also in the workplace. And I think we will get some laws coming in that are going to reform this. I said some time ago, there's going to be a turn against woke. It's a worldwide epidemic. It's been pushed on us by clandestine forces, mainly through education, and people have had enough of it. They really have had enough of it, and the general populace don't want this. And woe betide those political parties that are not prepared to deal with these issues, because they won't get your vote. Once you get someone gives it a voice, I think you'll see the majority of the people are sick and fed up with all this nonsense that we see infiltrating our television, infiltrating our adverts, infiltrating the corporate world, infiltrating our banking system, everywhere you look. And I think everybody really is fed up with it. What are the worst US states to get hit from the migrant crisis? Is that going to make prices go up? I feel in America, you see, some of the places like New York, for example, have been they're getting exactly the same problems that have happened to us in the UK. People head for wherever is the best place to um, put your head down, make a living, find accommodation. So the big cities are places that are going to get hit rather than states, rather than the particular states, isn't it? And I think there's going to be much more the same as we're getting in Europe. I feel we're getting cultural clashes. America is a huge country. North America is a huge country, but even North America struggles to take on such a flood of culturally different people. And although you don't have the same problems because of the extra division that we tend to have here in Europe, which is the extra division that comes from Islam that refuses to cooperate and is often, not all, but some, and there are so many extremists that say we got to have our own rules that are completely separate from your laws. America doesn't have quite that same problem, which is an added danger. But I do feel cultural division is going to happen a lot in states, particularly like I feel there would be clashes in I'm seeing it in New York, I'm seeing it in Los Angeles, even I'm seeing it in even Dallas. I get the feeling and I get Texas. I get a turn against migration in Texas. So I'm seeing division again, very similar to what we're going to see in France, very similar to what we're seeing in Germany, and the bubbles are about to pop on so many of these things that, like the Ching said, has been unaddressed and hidden from us. Okay, so what, we got any more there? They're talking to each other, guys. Now I see, so that kind of grab one. I don't read it yet, Edwin. Sorry. I'm going to get some of the patrons to help me with some of the questions when I go live like this. I have to grab what I can. I'm sure there's some brilliant questions that I missed. Sorry, but do put them in the comments afterwards. Edwin De Castro, not from Cuba, are you, guy? Craig, hello from Virginia, USA. Thank you for your amazing and honest shows. Very informative. The southern borders of the US seem to be absolute chaos. Do you see the situation improving? Sadly, not yet. I do. I feel Trump is going to come be the president again in America. He's going to overcome these latest legal challenges to him. The more they challenge him, the more people see that he is being the law is being used as a political weapon against him, either to try to put him into prison or to bankrupt him. Everybody can be destroyed by legal things. We all know how, if ever you've had to go to court, you know how enormous bills can be. So I don't feel it will be solved until Trump comes back into power. But then I feel he will close the border like a zip. It'll be one of the first things he will do, and he does what he says, and that will happen. And I feel that another thing I've been seeing too, I mean, I said a little while back, you remember, that I said I felt that there'd be starting moves to bring back a military service for people coming into countries. And that was said that a year or so ago. That's all started to happen now. There's been lots of talk about that, not actually been brought into force yet. But if people were forced into military service, I think it would show the person's willingness to become a proper citizen and to give something to the country. 3 years of service would be a good thing to give to the country, of any country, whether that be American or European countries. It doesn't necessarily have to be combative type of military service. It could be more like land army type of service from the Second World War, when they used to work the fields and things like that, or be there for crisis, or be there for environmental crises and things like that, which you're going to see more of. It could be, if done in the right way, something that wouldn't be a threat to a society. Supposing people were to turn against, or there'd be some civil unrests, and what side you take. So but it's less of a policing and more of a supportive roles. But I think that would be something that's going to come in more and more. I feel that happening more and more, and that type of idea that a person doesn't necessarily get citizenship by coming into a country. You don't necessarily get a passport. You might get a work visa of some sort, or a right to stay identification, as opposed to immediate citizenship with all the rights that it entails. And a sort of a right to stay visa would entitle you to work, but not necessarily to be able to get freebies. You would have to get, for example, medical insurance and things like that. And if you don't work, or you break the law in any way whatsoever, you're out on your ear. That would be a possible way of doing it. But we couldn't, here in the UK, we couldn't even do that for people that should come to this country, such as the Gerkas. We got Gerkas, a museum for the Gerkas in Winchester, where we run the Craig and Jane show, and wonderful work they did for Britain. Hugely patriotic people for Britain, and yet we didn't let them into the country, and yet we let people in coming across who've done nothing. So it's a horrible situation, really, is because it gives us so many compromises in our humanitarian view of things, isn't it? We want so much, all of us, to see one humanity. We don't want to see people suffering. But frankly, just opening our doors like we would open our doors in a party and let everybody in it means the whole lot's destroyed for everybody. What we've got to do, on the one hand, I agree, like you say, Celtic Cross says, we've got to get tougher. I think we have got to get tougher. You can have some of your opinions now if you want. I think we have got to get tougher, but at the same time, we also got to be much more caring and help other people in their own countries. We've got to help them rebuild their countries and make their places worth living in, rather than just sort of making an us and them situation. I see you putting some other things about the Gurkhas and the double standards we have. That's right, isn't it? So yeah, let's just have a few of your views, just as you want to put them up, and I'll stick a few up on the screen rather than questions. Not sure yet on that one. So I'm just clicking on what's coming up. I'm missing. The collapse of the EU, I've spoken about that. I'll have to be another one we'll have to do of another time. I'm just whacking up a few to see what. That'll be a good one for you later on. Yeah, I have spoken about that, but that's such a big one. I'll need to do a special video on that. I'm just grabbing a few. US gives millions to third world countries, and it does, doesn't it? It gets misused. It goes off into supporting regimes and juntas and all the rest of it, doesn't it? Yeah, I just putting a few up just out of curiosity, actually. Thanks for that. World Economic Forum. Yeah. Well, no, I mean that would be one other one. We ought to do one on that, hadn't we? It would be quite good to do one on the World Economic Forum. Because so much, doesn't it? So much goes on behind the scenes. I mean, us poor ordinary people, with a tiny little vote, we don't seem to. Votes don't seem to count. Decisions are made about the future of the world by people who really shouldn't be doing that. I mean, democracy, our power to vote, the power to control and have is gone. This is, I think, where there's so much despair in the world. In our societies, because we feel so unable to do anything about the situation, and we're scared to speak out. I mean, if I started speaking out extremist ideas here on YouTube, probably quite rightly, my channel would be banned. But some people now are getting to the point you're scared to even mention topics like the one we've talked about today, because it's so. Even this is borderline, and I'm not saying any extremist views. So it's a sad world, isn't it? Really, when we can't speak freely, we feel that our voice is always being muffled. Anyway, I'm gonna finish there. I'm gonna put up my little ending that you normally see at the Coffee with Craig, but you notice if those that come regularly that I've edited it a little bit, and I've been putting new little bits of predictions that I've made in this little ending clip that I put up, where I ultimately ask you to go to the website. So go and have a look at the website, guys, as well. Put your comments. Don't forget, if you've been here, give us a thumbs up, because it helps the algorithm with the channel. And Jane and I are going to do another show on Friday. I said to Jane, let's do another one. I'm going to talk about migration and immigration. Shall we do one on Friday on that? She says, I don't think I fancy that. So have you got any ideas that we should do for Friday's show? If you're here now, put them in the comments afterwards. If there's a topic you'd like, particularly me and Jane to deal with, because remember, slightly different energy to that on the Craig and Jane show. So we'll see you again on Friday, and I'll say to you, bye for now. Thanks for joining me. If you look back at my earlier predictions, and in particular the predictions I made on the newspaper, the Sun's website, I did actually say on there, the actual words were, there will be a flu epidemic linked to bioterrorism. And my thoughts are that Liz Truss will make it to the final, be the next PM. I think she will actually have a final battle between her and Rishi Sunak. We've not seen the full end of Boris Johnson either, I tell you. But Rishi Sunak actually will eventually, I feel, be the next leader of the Conservatives. So I think there's going to be a few conflicts that Britain's going to be drawn into, including I think Russia is going to take some moves against Ukraine. I think she will make it past her platinum jubilee, which comes up this year. But I think after that, we'll see a sudden and quick deterioration in the Queen's health. And I think, I think we might lose the Queen towards the end of 2022. There's going to be a huge backlash from over the Netflix programs and screening, because I feel it comes out at a bad time. Charles will come to become King Charles, but his reign, I feel, will be short.
I said that Prince Charles would be hit by an egg. And of course, there it is, all in the press today. Marvellous person she is. She does something extraordinary that could even put her life a little bit at risk with the way she did this. Okay.
Is there something also there that's not been spoken about fully? Did they also discover something with Kate that wasn't quite right?
A huge swarm of people knocking the doors of Europe and America. And I feel that Ukraine conflict is going to be a kind of a grinding conflict that goes on and on. I also feel that there's something going to happen in the Middle East as well. I feel as if there's going to be a sudden and unexpected thing happen in the Middle East. So I feel they're going to take it into their own hands, and I feel we're going to get a strike from Israel. This is going to be one of the significant things in 2023.
I've said it before and I say it again. I feel Israel, with the help from the USA, will strike the Iranian nuclear facilities.
I said that there would be an earthquake that would shake New York.
At this time, I've been sensing that for a while that there's going to be a big earthquake of some sort. And this could well come up during April period.
I'm seeing a bridge collapsing, actually the whole infrastructure of it going.